This is Voicecast, broadcasting live with breaking news. We've just received reports of a catastrophic incident unfolding at Regal Cineplex 15 in downtown. What started as an ordinary evening of entertainment has descended into utter chaos. Eyewitnesses describe scenes of panic, screaming, and confusion. Authorities are urging residents in the area to remain indoors and avoid unnecessary travel. Initial reports suggest that an unidentified outbreak has occurred within the theater. Emergency responders are overwhelmed as the situation continues to deteriorate. Details are sparse, but this much is clear. Something terrifying is happening inside. Stay tuned as we bring you live updates on this developing story. The evening began like any other at the popular downtown Cineplex. Crowds filled the lobby, buzzing with anticipation for the night's blockbusters. The scent of buttery popcorn wafted through the air, and marquee lights shimmered like promises of escapism. Families laughed, friends whispered excitedly, and couples settled in for a cozy night out. But beneath the surface, the first hints of trouble began to seep in. Faint screams echoed somewhere in the distance, dismissed by most as part of an elaborate prank or overzealous moviegoers. Shadows flickered unnaturally across the far end of the lobby, too quick for anyone to process. Then came the sound of shattering glass cutting through the hum of excitement like a blade. Eyes darted nervously, whispers grew louder. Little did they know the theater had already become the stage for a night of unimaginable horror. At first, it was subtle, just a handful of phones buzzing in unison, but soon the vibration grew louder, spreading like an invisible alarm across the theater. Confused patrons reached for their devices, reading cryptic alerts. Evacuate immediately. Avoid contact with individuals displaying violent behavior. The message was clear, yet incomprehensible to most. Conversations turned to murmurs to panic. Some dismissed it as a glitch, a prank gone too far, while others clutched their phones tightly, their faces pale with fear. Theater staff scrambled to restore order, their voices trembling as they urged everyone to stay calm. Yet the unease was palpable. The warning came too late. Whatever was happening outside the theater was already spilling in, and there was no time to prepare for what came next. And then it happened. The doors to Theater 4 burst open with a thunderous crack, silencing the murmurs in an instant. A man stumbled into the lobby, his clothes drenched in blood. His voice, raw and panicked, tore through the silence. "They're everywhere. You have to run." He didn't make it far before collapsing, his desperate gasps for air filling the space. The crowd froze, their collective shock rooting them to the spot. But shock turned to terror as the lights flickered above, plunging the once inviting theater into intermittent darkness. In those brief moments of light, glimpses of movement, unnatural, erratic, could be seen in the shadows beyond the broken door. Screams erupted, chaos breaking out like wildfire. People scrambled toward exits, but the crowd only collided in their panic. The once cozy theater was now a cacophony of terror, the scent of fear drowning out the popcorn. And somewhere in the darkness, a low guttural growl signaled that the nightmare had only just begun. The flickering lights offered fleeting glimpses of hope, but each burst of illumination revealed more horror than solace. Blood smeared the walls. Shadows moved unnaturally fast, their shapes human yet twisted beyond recognition. Panic swelled as cries for help drowned beneath the cacophony of shouts and growls. Staff and patrons alike tried to rally, to organize some form of escape, but as the emergency alarms blared and the exits became clogged with bodies, both living and dead, it became painfully clear that hope was slipping away with each flicker of light. Every second brought the infected closer, their relentless hunger unstoppable. And as the lights dimmed for what felt like the final time, one thing was certain. Survival was no longer a guarantee. The story begins with an ordinary shipment, a container filled with popcorn kernels destined for theaters across the country. These kernels, however, had a sinister origin. Sourced from a quarantine zone overseas, the shipment was flagged for contamination during an inspection. Yet, under mounting pressure to meet demand, these warnings were overlooked. The kernels were cleared without thorough testing, slipping through a flawed system that prioritized profit over precaution. At first, it seemed inconsequential, an isolated shipment destined for theaters like Regal Cineplex 15. But hidden within these kernels was a dormant pathogen, one that thrived under certain conditions. The spores, nearly undetectable, activated under the heat of popping machines. When consumed, they lay dormant in the human body, triggered only by an unexpected chain of events that night. Authorities had received scattered reports weeks prior, cases of nausea, aggression, and unexplained deaths in small towns. These warnings were dismissed as isolated incidents, with officials assuring the public there was no cause for concern. Investigations stalled, and as time passed, the truth faded into the background noise of daily life. Regal Cineplex 15 was packed that night. Families gathered for an evening of entertainment, unaware that the buttery popcorn they munched on would soon become the catalyst for their undoing. As the pathogen spread silently through the crowd, it waited, undetected, for the perfect moment to strike. The outbreak didn't begin with a bang, but with whispers, a low, rumbling sense of unease. By the time anyone realized the danger, it was already too late. The first signs of the infection were subtle, a theater usher stumbling as he walked, his movements jerky and unnatural. Nearby patrons assumed he was sick or exhausted from a long shift. But then he lunged, his teeth sinking into the arm of a man carrying a tray of drinks. Screams erupted, sharp and panicked, drawing the attention of others in the lobby. Within minutes, chaos consumed the theater. Those bitten transformed with horrifying speed, less than 2 minutes from the first signs of fever to full-blown feral aggression. The infected tore through the packed halls, their shrieks echoing in the dimly lit spaces. Families huddled together in fear as the infection spread like wildfire. The narrow corridors of the Cineplex became a death trap, trapping people with no way to escape. Parents shielded their children, desperate to protect them from the growing horde. A young couple sprinted toward an exit, only to find it blocked by an usher-turned-monster, his mouth dripping with blood. The infected were relentless, their movements unnaturally fast and driven by an insatiable hunger. Those who tried to fight back were quickly overpowered. In the darkness, the flickering glow of neon signs and movie screens cast eerie shadows over the carnage. The smell of buttered popcorn mixed with the metallic tang of blood, creating an atmosphere of surreal horror. The survivors who managed to escape the initial wave of attacks barricaded themselves in theaters and storage rooms. Inside one auditorium, a group of moviegoers crouched behind rows of seats, their breathing shallow as they listened to the chaos outside. Every sound, the distant scream of a victim, the pounding footsteps of the infected, felt like a countdown to their doom. In the midst of the chaos, a chilling realization began to dawn. The infection wasn't random. It was methodical, spreading through contact and turning friends, family, and strangers into feral attackers in mere moments. Those trapped inside knew they were running out of time, and the worst was yet to come. The chaos that erupted inside Regal Cineplex 15 was only the beginning. Within hours, the infection spread beyond the theater walls, spilling into the surrounding streets. Yet, as screams echoed through the night, and the infected moved in relentless waves, those in power struggled to grasp the magnitude of the unfolding catastrophe. Initial reports from the theater were vague. Panicked calls to 911 described a violent riot, with little mention of what was truly happening. Dispatchers sent police units to the scene, unaware of the horrors they were walking into. The first responders arrived to a scene of carnage, blood-streaked hallways, shattered glass, and victims clawing at one another in a frenzy. The infected turned on the officers almost immediately, and backup calls were lost in a tangle of static and screams. The city's emergency alert system, designed to warn residents of imminent danger, faltered under the weight of confusion. Authorities debated the nature of the threat. Was it a gang-related incident, a terrorist attack, or something far worse? By the time the first citywide alerts were issued, they were woefully inadequate. Generic warnings to avoid the area and remain indoors left residents unsure of what they were facing. News outlets added to the chaos. Some reported the events as a violent protest gone wrong, while others hinted at an unknown viral outbreak. One journalist claimed to have footage of an infected person attacking a news crew, but was quickly silenced by network higher-ups who feared inciting public panic. Rumors spread like wildfire on social media. Images of bloodied streets, unconfirmed death tolls, and whispers of zombies filled the feeds. In the halls of power, there was no consensus. Health officials urged immediate quarantines, while local politicians hesitated, fearing the economic fallout of a citywide lockdown. The lack of decisive action allowed the infection to spread unchecked. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by panicked residents, became breeding grounds for the pathogen. Doctors and nurses were among the first to fall, their screams echoing through emergency rooms as they were overwhelmed by the infected. Amid the disarray, the federal government remained silent. Requests for assistance from state authorities went unanswered as confusion reigned. By the time the National Guard was mobilized, the city's infrastructure was in shambles, and escape routes were clogged with terrified citizens trying to flee. The infection had become unstoppable, and the people left behind felt abandoned by those sworn to protect them. As the city descended into chaos, stories of survival began to emerge. Fragmented accounts of terror, loss, and the unthinkable choices people were forced to make. Maria Alvarez, a single mother, recounted her desperate search for her teenage son, Javier. They had gone to the theater together that night, but when the infection broke out, they became separated. Her voice trembled as she described the moment she last saw him. He was there, just ahead of me, trying to open the emergency exit. Then they grabbed him. I tried to reach him, but there were too many. I don't even know if he's still... Her words trailed off into sobs. Another survivor. Kevin Patel had been working at the theater's concession stand when the first attacks began. I thought it was some kind of prank, like those stupid internet challenges. But then I saw the blood, real blood. And the way they moved, it wasn't normal. I barely made it out. I had to lock myself in the storage room until things went quiet. Kevin's haunted eyes told the rest of the story. Quiet didn't last long. In a nearby hospital, Dr. Elaine Parker spoke of the horrors she witnessed in the emergency room. We were unprepared, completely unprepared. People came in with bites, their skin gray and clammy. And then, right there, in front of us, they changed. I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't a virus. It was a nightmare. These personal accounts painted a grim picture of a city caught off guard by an unprecedented crisis. They were voices of heartbreak and resilience, of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Each story carried the weight of lives forever altered, and each one hinted at the same terrifying truth. No one was safe. But amid the despair, there was a faint glimmer of hope. Survivors shared tales of courage, strangers pulling others to safety, families risking everything to stay together, and individuals who refused to give up, even as the odds grew impossibly bleak. The infection was spreading, the city was falling, and the authorities were in disarray. But the human spirit, battered and bruised, fought on, determined to survive another day in a world turned upside down. Inside Regal Cineplex 15, the madness has taken hold. The once lively theater, with its plush seats and sweet smell of popcorn, now stands as a grim fortress, blood-stained and echoing with the sound of frantic footsteps and muffled screams. Survivors have barricaded themselves inside screening rooms, huddling together, eyes wide with terror as the horror outside intensifies. The faint hum of movie audio tracks, distorted and warping from the damaged speakers, provides an eerie soundtrack to the chaos. The cinematic sounds of explosions and action scenes bleed through the thin walls, mingling with the desperate cries for help echoing in the darkened hallways. It's as if the world outside has blurred into a grotesque parody of the very entertainment it once offered. In one room, a group of terrified moviegoers clutch onto whatever they can find: broken chair legs, handbags, anything that could serve as a weapon. Some try to stay silent, but the weight of fear hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. A faint sound, like scratching, emanates from the hallway. In a moment of panic, someone screams, and the infected outside lurch forward, drawn by the noise. It's a split-second mistake, but it costs them everything. Outside, the hallway is slick with blood. Pools of red stain the floors, and the walls are smeared with the frantic attempts of the infected to reach their prey. A few survivors, desperate to escape, try to navigate the maze of hallways, only to find themselves cornered. They move cautiously, but every step they take is a potential death sentence. One man, desperate to make it to the front exit, is grabbed from behind. His scream is cut short as the infected tear into him. His blood splashes across the screen of a nearby theater, forever marking the spot where he fell. A woman, alone and trembling, rounds the corner just in time to witness the brutal attack. Her breath catches in her throat, and her only thought is to run, to find a place to hide before they come for her next. The survivors who have managed to make it to the screening rooms are locked in, but the constant pounding on the barricades is deafening. Every few moments, they hear the growls of the infected just outside, their twisted forms pressing against the doors. There's no way out, no way to get help. And the longer they wait, the more desperate they become. Among the survivors, 3 faces stand out, each carrying their own unique burdens, yet bound together by the shared will to survive. Samantha, a resourceful college student, has taken charge in the chaos. Her eyes, once full of the idealism that comes with youth, are now hardened with the necessity of survival. She's a natural leader, and despite her fear, she's quick to act. In a theater full of strangers, she's the one organizing the makeshift barricades, ensuring everyone has something to defend themselves with. It's not much: broken chairs, fire extinguishers, and whatever else they can scavenge. But it's enough to buy them time. Samantha has a sharp mind and a calm demeanor under pressure, and her quick thinking has kept them alive so far. But as the infected grow louder, pressing against the walls, the weight of responsibility is starting to show on her face. Then there's Paul, the middle-aged theater manager. He wasn't prepared for this, not in the slightest. He had a life, an ordinary, predictable one, before this nightmare began. But as the chaos unfolded, he's become something more than he ever expected. His face is marked by grief. He lost his family years ago in a car accident, and now he's all that's left of his small team. The staff he worked with for years, people he knew like family, are now gone, overtaken by the infected or lost to the madness. Paul feels the weight of his failure, the guilt of not being able to save them. He's trying to keep it together, trying to hold on to the little hope that remains. But his hands tremble as he tries to secure the door, as if they can feel the crushing reality that there's no escape. Then there's Leo, a 9-year-old boy whose world was shattered the moment the infection broke out. He was at the theater with his parents, excited for a night of entertainment, never imagining that it would become his last. Now, separated from his family, Leo's terrified, hiding in the dark corners of the theater. He's clinging to a stuffed bear, his only comfort in this nightmare. Samantha found him in the hallway earlier, crying and alone, and took him in without a second thought. She promised to protect him. But as the infected grow closer and the walls of their safe room begin to shudder with each attack, it's unclear how long they can keep their promise. Each of these survivors faces their own battle, not just against the infected outside, but against the darkness that looms in their hearts. For Samantha, it's the fear that she's not enough, that she won't be able to keep everyone safe. For Paul, it's the regret of every life lost, every second he wasn't able to act. And for Leo, it's the overwhelming loneliness that only a child can truly understand. But in this theater, in the heart of terror, they are united by one thing: the will to survive. And as the infected continue to push against their barricades, each survivor must face their fears and decide just how far they're willing to go to live another day. The theater is a cage. Survivors huddle in their makeshift shelters, barricaded behind doors that are beginning to buckle under the weight of desperation. Outside, the infected grow louder with each passing moment, their grotesque snarls creeping into the survivors' fragile sanctuary. There's no escape. No reinforcements coming. It's just them now, stuck in this nightmare, forced to improvise their survival with whatever they can find. Samantha, ever the strategist, moves quickly from person to person, directing them to gather anything they can use as a weapon. The fire extinguishers, heavy and awkward but capable of delivering a solid blow, are distributed, along with broken chair legs and anything that might keep the infected at bay. They won't be able to hold them off forever, but for now it's enough. Every survivor is forced to tap into something primal within themselves. Even the most ordinary of objects, a flashlight, a piece of wood, a pen, becomes a potential weapon in this fight for life. With each passing minute, the infected grow bolder. They know they're getting closer to their prey. They claw at the barricades, their nails screeching against the wood. But Samantha has a plan, something that could give them an edge. She gathers a few survivors and starts moving toward the theater's ventilation system. It's not ideal, but it's their best shot. "Stay quiet," Samantha whispers, motioning to Paul and Leo, who are following closely behind. "We move through the vents, stay out of sight. If we can make it to the back of the building, we can find another exit." The sound of scratching and muffled growls fills the air, and for a moment it feels as though the building is alive with fear. But they press on. The ventilation ducts are cramped and uncomfortable, but they offer a sliver of hope, a chance to escape the open hallways where death waits at every corner. As they crawl through the ducts, the echoes of the infected's howls grow distant. But that doesn't mean they're safe. The air grows stale, and the confined space makes every breath feel like it could be their last. They don't know how much longer the vents will hold, but for now, it's the only thing keeping them from the jaws of death. Leo, whose small frame fits easily through the narrow spaces, leads the way. His eyes are wide with fear, but he's determined. Samantha can't help but feel a pang of sadness when she looks at him. He's just a boy, yet he's already been forced to grow up too quickly. But the ventilation system is a temporary solution. It's a way to buy time, to delay the inevitable. They know they're running out of options, but Samantha holds on to that tiny thread of hope, praying that something, anything, will change. Time is running out. The barricades that once stood firm against the infected are beginning to give way. The pounding on the doors intensifies, and the survivors can hear the telltale cracking of wood. The sound is like thunder in the silence, growing louder with each passing moment. Samantha, Paul, and Leo are still in the ventilation ducts, but they know it's only a matter of time before the infected breach the building's final defenses. The police, who had once been their hope, are nowhere to be found. The survivors' frantic radio calls have gone unanswered. Outside, it's clear that the authorities have been overwhelmed. There's no backup coming. They're on their own. As they crawl through the ducts, They can hear the chaos unfolding below them. The infected are no longer just scratching at the barricades. They're breaking through, their twisted forms spilling into the theaters and hallways. The survivors below scream in terror as the horde surges forward, overtaking them one by one. It's a nightmare, and no one is safe. Samantha's heart races. The hope she clung to is slipping through her fingers. She pushes forward, determined to keep moving, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Every footstep in the duct feels heavier, and the stench of sweat and panic fills the air. She's fighting not just for her life, but for the lives of those she's promised to protect. Paul, too, is struggling. His hands tremble as he follows behind Samantha. He's no stranger to grief, but this is something else. The faces of his colleagues, his friends, those he failed to protect, haunt him. The guilt weighs on him, and every new sound from the infected is a reminder of how little time they have left. And then there's Leo. His small frame is beginning to tire from crawling through the narrow ducts, but he doesn't complain. He's a child, yet he's carrying the burden of a grown man's responsibility. Samantha can see the exhaustion in his eyes, but he refuses to stop. For him, there's no turning back now. The moment they hear the first crack of the barricades breaking completely, they know it's over. The infected are inside. There's no way to outrun them. They're trapped. The ventilation system, their last hope for survival, is crumbling just as the infected break through the final door. The survivors are faced with the horrifying truth. They are alone in this nightmare, and there's no one coming to save them. As they reach a dead end in the ducts, Samantha freezes. She can hear them now, the infected below, their snarls growing louder as they close in. There's nowhere to hide, no exit left, just the cold, crushing weight of the reality they must face. The air is thick with fear. The survivors huddle in their makeshift sanctuary, their last line of defense. The barricades, Samantha, Paul, and Leo are among the few who remain calm in the face of the encroaching nightmare. But that calm is about to be shattered. The pounding at the door is relentless, louder now than ever. The infected have breached the building. One by one, the barricades that once seemed so sturdy are falling apart. There is no stopping them now. The survivors are trapped. But it's in these desperate moments that a single reckless action can change everything. The group is on edge, trying to keep the door sealed while scavenging for any remaining supplies. That's when it happens. Paul, ever the leader, is distracted for just a moment. His gaze fixed on a window, watching the infected swarm outside. He doesn't hear it at first. The faint click of the door unlocking, the shift of a latch being released, barely audible over the chaos. But then it happens. Wait, no! Samantha shouts, her voice tinged with panic. But it's too late. The door swings open and the first infected lurches into the room. It's a nightmare unleashed, a tidal wave of death crashing into their sanctuary. The survivors scramble, their instincts taking over as they grab whatever they can to fend off the infected. The chaos is overwhelming. Screams fill the air, mingling with the guttural growls of the infected. The survivors fight back, but they are no match for the sheer number of attackers. It's a massacre. In the midst of the frenzy, Samantha notices the person who betrayed them. It's a young woman, desperate to escape, her face twisted with fear and regret. I didn't know. They were too close. I thought if I could just get out. Her voice trembles, but there's no time for apologies. She's already made her choice, and the price is their lives. Samantha doesn't hesitate. With a fierce look in her eyes, she tackles the woman to the ground, dragging her away from the door just as another infected lunges for them. But in the process, Paul is knocked down, his leg pinned beneath the debris from the collapsing barricade. "Go!" Paul shouts, his voice strained. "Get out of here." But Samantha can't leave him behind. She won't. She's already lost too much. With a strength born of sheer will, she lifts the heavy debris off Paul's leg, the blood from his wound soaking through his clothes. But it's not enough. The infected are closing in and there's no way out. "You have to go," Paul repeats, his voice softer now, resignation in his eyes. "Take Leo, get to the roof. It's the only chance." Samantha hesitates, her heart breaking as she looks at the man who's been her ally through all this. But she knows what she has to do. With a final desperate look, she pulls Leo toward the exit, pushing him ahead of her. The chaos continues around them, but Samantha's resolve hardens. She won't let them all die in vain. She won't. The door slams shut behind them, but the sound of the infected's growls remains. Samantha's breath is ragged as she pulls Leo into a narrow hallway, the walls seeming to close in on them with each step. They've escaped the immediate danger, but something doesn't feel right. The air is thick, too thick. Samantha's mind races. There's something about the atmosphere in the theater, something that doesn't sit well. They've been locked in this place for too long, surrounded by sealed walls and closed doors. The ventilation system, which they thought was a lifesaver, may now be their tomb. The thoughts hit her like a cold slap. What if the infected aren't the only threat? What if the air itself is contaminated? Her heart skips a beat. No, it can't be, she mutters to herself, quickening her pace. But she knows, deep down, that her suspicion might be true. They reach a small supply closet at the far end of the hall, and Samantha pushes the door open, pulling Leo inside. He's looking up at her, his face pale, his small hands trembling. But it's the look in his eyes, the silent, unspoken question that cuts her to the core. "Are we safe now?" he asks. Samantha doesn't know how to answer. Suddenly, a loud mechanical noise comes from above. The ventilation system kicks on. At first, it's just a hum in the background, nothing out of the ordinary. But then the air becomes heavier, the scent in the room fouler. She's always known that the infected were dangerous, but this is something else. She scans the room desperately, searching for any clue that might explain what's happening. That's when she spots it. A small, discarded notebook on the floor, its pages half crumpled and stained. She picks it up, quickly flipping through the pages. The words jump out at her. "Warning, airborne transmission. Prolonged exposure to enclosed spaces may lead to infection, even without bites." The words make her stomach drop. Samantha feels the weight of the revelation hit her like a freight train. The air in the building is contaminated. Those who haven't been bitten, those who have simply been trapped in the theater too long, are at risk. And now they've run out of time. "We need to move. Now," Samantha says, her voice sharp with urgency. Leo looks up at her, eyes wide, and she doesn't have the heart to explain. There's no time for that now. They need to escape, and fast. But every second they remain in this building, the more the air itself becomes a silent killer. The only way out is up, the roof. They need to get there, now. But with the infected closing in and the air growing more toxic with every breath, the clock is ticking. The theater, once a place of entertainment and refuge, now stands as a crumbling fortress. The infected grow bolder with every passing minute, pushing their way closer and closer to the survivors. The air inside is heavy with tension, the walls seeming to close in as Samantha and Leo stand at the base of a precarious staircase leading up to the roof. It's the last chance for survival, but the climb will be anything but easy. "We don't have much time," Samantha mutters under her breath, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. She can hear the infected moaning in the distance, a constant reminder of the horrors they face. The weight of their predicament bears down on her, but she forces herself to stay focused. She can't afford to lose it now, not when they're so close. Leo stands beside her, his small face pale with fear. Are we going to make it? His voice cracks, barely a whisper. Samantha kneels in front of him, meeting his eyes. We will. I won't let anything happen to you. Her voice is firm, but inside she's not so sure. The infected are closing in, and the path ahead is fraught with peril. Every step, every breath could be their last. She glances up at the staircase again, feeling the urgency in her bones. It's the only way out. She can almost see it. The roof, the possible escape, the hope of rescue. The climb is steep and unstable, but it's their only shot at survival. The infected have surrounded the building, and the air, poisoned with their presence, is quickly becoming a threat in itself. They need to get up there and signal for help before it's too late. With a deep breath, she reaches for Leo's hand. We climb now. Stay close, and don't look back. The climb begins, but it's not as simple as it seems. The staircase groans beneath their weight, its integrity failing with each step. Samantha grips the railing tightly, her knuckles white with strain. Every step feels like a mile as they ascend higher and higher, the sounds of the infected snarls growing louder with each passing second. The air is thick, and the stench of decay fills her nostrils. She hears a crash behind them, a door slamming open. They've been found. The infected are closing in. Their once quiet moans have turned into blood-curdling shrieks, and she knows it's only a matter of time before they catch up. Faster! She urges, her voice cracking with fear. Leo, his legs trembling with exhaustion, struggles to keep up. The stairs are slick with blood and debris, making each step more treacherous. Samantha's heart races in her chest as she tries to push forward, but she's starting to feel the weight of her own fatigue. The infected are relentless, their hunger insatiable. She can hear them growling behind her now, their steps echoing off the walls, getting closer and closer. Leo trips, his foot catching on a loose step, and for a moment time seems to slow. The infected are almost on them, and the distance between life and death is measured in seconds. But Samantha doesn't think. She reacts. She grabs Leo's arm, yanking him upright and propelling them both forward. Keep moving, she shouts, urging him up the final steps. They reach the top, and Samantha throws open the door to the roof. The cold air hits her like a slap, a bitter contrast to the suffocating heat of the building below. But there's no time to appreciate the relief. It's only a temporary reprieve. They're not safe yet. Samantha scans the roof, desperate for anything that can signal for help. The infected are still inside, and the door behind them creaks ominously. She has no idea how long it will hold. Leo pulls at her sleeve, his voice shaky. What now? What do we do? Her mind races. There's no time for hesitation. She spots a nearby vent, a small glimmer of hope, a signal, a chance. But as she makes her way toward it, the door to the roof starts to bend, the infected pushing against it, trying to break through. The roof is their last stand. Samantha grabs the vent cover, her hands shaking as she struggles to loosen it. We need to get a signal out. Now, she mutters, more to herself than to Leo. Her heart pounds in her chest, but she forces herself to stay focused. They can't give up now. The door groans, and the infected grow louder. Time is running out. With one final wrench, the vent cover comes free. She holds it up, ready to make the signal, but just as she's about to do so, a loud crash rings out from behind her. The door shatters. The infected are here. The chaos of the rooftop doesn't let up. The infected are pouring through the door, and Samantha can feel her heart sinking. She's seconds away from being overwhelmed, but her hand clenches around the vent cover. There's one last thing she has to do before they're swallowed by the nightmare. In the heat of the moment, her eyes catch something in the corner of the roof, a piece of paper fluttering in the wind. She reaches for it, her fingers numb with the cold, and unfolds it with trembling hands. It's a memo. A simple piece of corporate bureaucracy. but it hits her like a freight train. Recall notice contaminated popcorn batch, she reads aloud, her voice barely audible over the screams and snarls of the infected. She feels her stomach churn. The theater, the place they thought was a safe haven, had received a warning, a recall notice for the popcorn that had infected so many. But instead of taking action, the management chose to ignore it, fearing the financial loss of pulling the product. The realization strikes her like a lightning bolt. This was never just an outbreak. It was corporate negligence that set everything in motion. The infected didn't just stumble upon this place. They were created by greed, by a company that valued profits over the safety of its customers. Corporate greed, she mutters bitterly, clutching the memo in her hand. This was all avoidable. Leo looks up at her, confusion in his eyes. He doesn't fully understand, but he can see the shift in Samantha's expression. Samantha shoves the memo into her pocket. There's no time to process it, not yet. But this truth, it's a bitter one, and it'll haunt her for the rest of her life. As the infected close in, Samantha realizes the full extent of what they've been up against. The people in charge didn't just fail to protect them, they actively chose not to. And now they're paying the price. The outbreak, the tragedy, it was all a result of corporate greed and indifference. And the survivors are left to pick up the pieces. The survivors stand at the roof's edge, breathless from the climb, their legs aching with the effort. But the relief they had once anticipated upon reaching the rooftop now fades into something far more terrifying. What they see below isn't the safety they'd hoped for. It's chaos, a city consumed by fire. The skyline, once a symbol of life and hope, is now a jagged silhouette against a burning sky. Flames lick the edges of buildings, devouring entire blocks. The distant sound of sirens is drowned by the more insidious noises, the shrieks and growls of the infected echoing through the streets below. The once bustling city has become a battleground, a monument to devastation. Samantha's heart sinks as she scans the horizon. Helicopters hover above, their rotors slicing through the smoky air, but they don't land. She watches helplessly as they circle, broadcasting evacuation orders that do nothing to quell the growing terror in her chest. These helicopters, lifelines for so many, refuse to land. The infected are everywhere, and the risk is too great. "They're not landing," Leo whispers, his voice trembling as he looks up at the helicopters. His small hand clutches Samantha's sleeve. "Why?" "They can't," Samantha replies, her voice strained with frustration. "It's too dangerous." She feels a pit form in her stomach as the reality sets in. They are trapped. Even now, as the helicopters circle overhead, there's no salvation. The infection has spread too far, the damage too deep. She had hoped for a miracle, but miracles were in short supply now. Her mind races, trying to think of another way out. The helicopters should have come, but they didn't. The city is burning, and time is running out. Leo tugs at her sleeve again, his voice breaking. "We have to do something. They'll leave us here." Samantha looks at him, her face softening for a moment. He's just a child, caught in a world he doesn't understand. His eyes, wide with fear, reflect the hopelessness of their situation. "I know," she whispers, her words filled with a sorrow she can't hide. "But we can't give up. There's no choice. They can't stay here forever." The infected are still inside the building, clawing at the doors, and each moment the walls seem to grow thinner. The helicopters above might be their only chance, but it's slipping away. A loud crash from inside the building snaps Samantha out of her thoughts. The infected are getting closer. She looks at Leo, then at the helicopters, then back at the others. There's a flicker of decision in her eyes. They have to make it, but the truth is she doesn't know how. "We'll get out of here, Leo. I promise." But her words, meant to reassure, feel hollow. As the city burns beneath them, the sky above is a darkened canvas of smoke and fire. A terrifying reminder that the world they once knew has already ended. As the helicopters continue their fruitless circling, Samantha's thoughts begin to sharpen, focused on what must come next. Her eyes flicker back to the door that leads back into the theater, the last barrier between them and the infected. The door is weakening, the wood splintering under the relentless assault. "We don't have much time," she says, her voice firm as she turns to the others. "They'll break through any second." Leo looks up at her with fear, but he doesn't say anything. He knows the truth. There's no more running, no more hiding. Their only option now is to fight for a sliver of hope, no matter how small it may be. Samantha's eyes fall on the emergency PA system, an old relic still hanging on the wall. Her fingers curl into fists. It's the only tool she has left, and it might be their only chance to make a difference. The infection, no, the entire world, is slipping through their fingers, but there's one last chance to reach out, one last message to broadcast. Without hesitation, she moves toward the PA system, her heart pounding in her chest. The infected will be upon them in moments. This is her moment, the only one she'll get. "Samantha!" Leo's voice shakes as he steps toward her, his hands gripping the railing. "What are you going to do?" She doesn't turn to face him, but the weight of her gaze is palpable. There's no easy way to say it. "I'm going to tell them everything. They need to know what's really happening." Leo blinks, confusion clouding his face. "But the helicopters, they'll leave us here?" "I know," Samantha says, her voice steady now, more for herself than for him. "But if anyone's going to survive, they need to understand what's coming. The infection isn't just a bite. It's airborne. They need to know." She reaches for the microphone, taking a steadying breath. Her fingers hover over the switch. This will be her last chance to make the world understand, to make sure that what happened here doesn't go unnoticed, doesn't die with them. Samantha presses the button. The silence is broken by the sound of her voice, clear and urgent, flooding the airwaves. "To anyone who can hear this, listen carefully. What you've heard about the infection, it's not the full truth. It's not just bites that spread it. It's in the air, in confined spaces. If you're inside, you're already at risk. The infected are only part of the problem. The true danger is the air you breathe. Get out. Stay out. Don't trust anyone. The government is hiding this from you. They won't help you. They never did." She takes a sharp breath, her voice shaking now, but she presses on. "If you're still alive, find a way to survive, and don't wait for help. There won't be any." The words hang in the air, chilling in their finality. Just as she finishes speaking, the door bursts open behind her. "The infected are here." Their growls echo in the open space, drawing closer. Samantha can hear their footsteps, the scraping of their claws on the ground. She turns to face them, but her mind is clear. She's done what she can. And then, just as her message reaches its peak, the PA system crackles and dies. The signal is cut off. But it's too late. The message has been sent. Samantha stands tall, facing the oncoming storm. She's ready. As the infected swarm her, she knows there's nothing more to be done. The world is changing, but her warning will echo in the silence long after they're gone. As the room falls into a tense silence, Samantha's final words still linger in the air, vibrating with an urgency that refuses to dissipate. The infected are closing in, the walls shaking with the sound of relentless pounding, but she knows. She knows. There's nothing more she can do. The message has been sent, and now all she can do is pray it reaches someone, anyone, who can stop the nightmare. The emergency PA system crackles, the hum of static punctuating her words as she leans in close, her voice steady, despite the fear gripping her heart. To those listening, heed this warning. Avoid public spaces. Avoid contact. Trust no one. Her voice falters just for a second, but she regains her composure. This is Voicecast signing off for now. The last word hangs in the air, a whispered promise of doom. And then, just like that, the broadcast cuts off. The airwaves are filled with an eerie, mechanical hiss, a reminder that the world they once knew is slipping into oblivion. The sound of the PA system fades to nothingness, replaced by a deep, unsettling silence. The survivors behind Samantha are frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. They understand. There's nothing left. The world has turned its back on them. Samantha's fingers hover over the PA switch, but she doesn't need to press it again. The message has been delivered, and now it's out of her hands. There's no coming back from this. Did they hear us? Leo asks, his voice barely more than a whisper. I don't know, Samantha responds, her voice distant. But we tried. The tension is thick. A quiet despair settling over them as they listen to the sounds of the infected growing closer. It's not just the monsters outside. The real monsters are the ones who've been hiding the truth all along. The government, the authorities, they knew. They knew the infection was airborne, and they did nothing. Her mind races, the questions and regrets filling her thoughts. But there's no time for them now. She's done everything she could. Now, all she has left is the knowledge that she has tried. Her only hope is that her final message reaches someone who can still make a difference. But who? Who is left to save them? The infected are now so close that the survivors can hear their guttural growls, a terrible reminder of the world they've lost. The barricades are no longer enough. The walls won't hold. The roof offers no protection. They have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Samantha moves away from the PA system, her hands trembling. Her body feels heavy, like it's been drained of all energy. Every second stretches on forever as the sound of the infected claws at her mind. What now? Leo asks, his voice small, uncertain. Samantha looks at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. We wait, she says, her voice breaking for the first time. We wait and we pray that someone out there is listening. We pray that we made a difference. But deep down, she knows that the chance of survival is slim. The city below them is already burning. The helicopters circling without landing, unable to help. The outside world, it seems, has already written them off. The infected begin to breach the final barriers, their relentless assault growing louder. They're here. Samantha takes one last look at the others. Her eyes linger on Leo, that glimmer of hope still clinging to him despite the horror around them. She forces a smile that is more a mask than anything else. I'm sorry, she says quietly, but the words feel hollow. There's nothing more to say, no more goodbyes, just an endless wait for the inevitable. And then, just as the infected begin to pour through the door, the final transmission ends. The radio static takes over, filling the airwaves with a low, ominous hum. For those who are still listening, it's a haunting reminder of the world's demise. As the static drones on, the silence of the room is broken only by the slow, rhythmic pounding of the infected outside. The survivors huddle together, each of them bracing for what comes next. The world may be over, but the message remains. And somewhere, in the far reaches of the airwaves, there's still the faintest hope that someone, somewhere, is listening.